afternoon and welcome to Sunday in Chicago. I'm Theresa Gutierrez. How would you feel if you had a child and you found out that it desperately needed an operation in order to survive? Well, fortunately, when you do a job like this, every so often you get to help someone. And what happened is that someone came to me and said that there was this child out there that needed this operation. And so that's what this entire show is going to be about today. And I'm going to introduce you to a well-known, well-renowned local neurosurgeon here in Chicago, Dr. Daniel Hafez from the Chicago Institute of Neurosurgery and Neural Research. And the reason I know Dr. Hafez is because he is the same neurosurgeon that operated on me several years ago. But before we start our conversation, I'd first like to introduce you to the story of baby Santiago. Santiago is an 18-month-old child from Mexico who has a life-threatening condition that, if not repaired, will cost him his life. The baby's case became known after the mayor of Mexico City was informed by me about the child during a recent visit to Chicago as part of the Sister Cities program.
The situation is that the operation is around 100,000, 100,000, no, 200,000. And we really don't have that much. So we are trying to ask help for the people to help us to save Santiago's life.
But with the intervention of KISS, the Kids International Surgical Services Fund, baby Santiago just might make it. Alvin Gutierrez, who heads up KISS along with his brother Robert, has committed to helping this baby.
The Baby Santiago Fund is a conglomerate of individuals that reach out not only with the benefits of dollars, but with their heart and resources.
The doctor who will perform the surgery is world-renowned Chicago neurosurgeon, Dr. Dan Solomon Hafez.
To summarize, I would have to say that baby Santiago is extremely fortunate to be in this good condition after his experiences over the last year. He has a problem that, at least in my opinion, requires a surgical cure, and today, more than ever, would be the right time to be doing that. And on the basis of the x-rays that I've seen, it seems as feasible, as doable as it ever will be.
The condition that baby Santiago has is called a cavernous malformation, occurring in only about 0.5% of the population. Hemorrhaging occurs in the brain as a result of this condition, and depending on the location of the bleeding can be very dangerous. Baby Santiago has had at least 3 bleeds this year alone in a critical area of the brain, the brainstem. So far, his facial muscles and his eyes have been affected. If he suffers any more bleedings, he will eventually lapse into a coma from which he may not recover. But with surgery, his prognosis is good.
I would not consider this an emergency where we have to do it tomorrow, but I do consider it a relatively urgent problem. Because he has suffered a series of bleeds, and the fact of the matter is it's completely unpredictable when the next one will take place. Will it be a month from now, or will it be 10 years from now? I cannot tell you, but if past is prologue, then I believe he will have a number of bleeds in the near future if we don't do anything.
There would always be the possibility for side effects later on. But if the surgery is successful, the probability is that the child will continue to grow and develop normally. The good news about being a child is that the brain is very plastic and can make unbelievable degrees of recovery.
My involvement in baby Santiago started with my sister some years ago that acquired, or that was befallen an aneurysm. We almost lost her. It was very close. The doctor and the organization was CINN, and the doctor was Dan Hafez. Thereafter, my brother's son had a malformation in the stem, and the clinic was CINN, and the doctor was Dan Hafez. My own personal experience, my son was injured real severely, and not only Leonard Cirillo, but Dan Hafez gave me counsel. So if it's not for these gentlemen in this organization, I would not have a family today.
Baby Santiago's mother and grandmother are willing to stay in Chicago until he receives the medical treatment he needs from the doctor who has successfully performed this surgery before.
No, there was
Right
no
to
much
Chicago.
hope in Mexico for Santiago. There's not.
There's no hope because more than anything, Dr. Jefes has a lot of experience operating this kind of malformation. And we didn't find any doctor in Mexico that could operate him with such success as he has.
As you can see, Santiago's really a cute baby. And in all honesty, the reason I'm doing this show is because Dr. Daniel Jefes came to my brothers, and my brothers came to me, and I know that I would not be here today if it were not for Dr. Jefes, because he saved my life. And he is desperately trying to save this baby's life. He is willing to do the operation and not charge anything for it. Santiago was in Mexico. He is now here. We brought him here. And it's amazing the response that you have gotten to this. When you looked at baby Santiago, were you surprised to see him when you looked at the x-rays on that?
Teresa, first let me thank you for doing this program, because it's a wonderful thing that everybody's trying to do for this child, and I'm playing just a small part in it. I was amazed by his condition. I would expected from the x-ray to see a fairly disabled child, and for all intents and purposes, other than the fact that his eyes don't move very well, he's a very bright, very energetic, very engaging little boy.
And you know what, we're going to bring him on later on, but we didn't want to bring him on at the beginning because you don't know if a child can stay through the whole show. But also when I told the story to Maggie Daly, our First Lady, and she immediately put her stamp of approval on trying to raise funds for baby Santiago. And then because of Maggie Daly's involvement, others followed, and we'll talk about that later on. Now, I know that as a doctor, you'd like to do the surgery immediately, and the problem is that obviously you need funds before you can go into a hospital. They're not going to, the surgery will not take place at Columbus Hospital. It has to be a children's hospital, right?
That's correct. We do operate on some older children, but 18 months of age is, I think, a little young for our institution. We do have privileges at the children's hospital, and that facility is better suited to take care of him after the surgery than our institution.
And the surgery, I know, is tentatively scheduled for...
I'm doing my best to get it done by the end of next week, perhaps Thursday the 16th, if everything falls into place, and that's primarily the funding.
And everything falling into place obviously means that you need a certain amount of funds. Now, I mean, obviously funds have been raised, but it's still not enough, and it's because this child is not from Chicago, but the child is from Mexico, and this surgery could have not been performed in Mexico because they have not perfected this type of surgery, from what I understand.
That's what his doctors felt, and that's why they sent the x-rays up for review at our institution several months ago. And initially we were a little bit conservative, but when the child suffered another bleed, then it became clear that something had to be done.
Now, the child couldn't, I mean, you can then would continue to have these bleeds. He could not lead a normal life. He would not be able to live.
It's unlikely that he would live very long. He has no wiggle room, let's say. He's had 3 bleeds, and the next one easily could be a fatal bleed.
And it could happen at any time. It's not something that is predictable.
Totally unpredictable.
And how does someone get something like this cavernous malformation? I mean, and their lesions, how does this develop?
There are two lines of thought. One group of patients seem to inherit an erroneous gene, a faulty gene that results in the development of abnormal blood vessels, and this can continue throughout their life. And another group have an isolated sort of occurrence of this one-time event, and it's way too early to say what Santiago's condition really is.
Let's take a break, and when I come back, I want to talk about, you know, what type of life he can lead after a surgery. We'll be back right after these messages. Welcome back, and we're talking about baby Santiago, and you just saw the footage, and this is a child that is right now here in our city of Chicago, and he desperately needs brain surgery in order to live a productive life. And with me I have Dr. Daniel Jefes with CINN, the Chicago Institute of Neurosurgery and Neuro Research. What type of how long will the surgery take? I'm curious about that.
Theresa, something like this could take probably a minimum of 4 hours, but depending on how intricate the findings at surgery are, it could easily take 6 or 8 hours.
How do you prepare for an 8-hour surgery? I mean, you obviously have to be physically in shape for that kind of, the stress I can't even imagine.
Get a good night's sleep.
Okay.
have a hearty breakfast, don't drink coffee.
Oh, I remember telling you you should have a candy bar before you did my surgery. What type of prognosis is out there for baby Santiago?
With successful surgery, he should live a long and healthy life.
Will he have to be followed and monitored, or is it because he's so young that he's resilient?
That certainly is in his advantage. He'll be followed on an annual basis by performing an MRI scan of the brain, which will allow us to determine whether there's any recurrence of bleeding. That should not occur if we do a successful surgery. It will also allow us to determine whether he develops any new such lesions in the future. It's a little hard to predict.
And also, what we have to mention is that this is a young couple with their child. It's their only child. They have used all of their funds. They've used their funds coming here and treating the child. So are they, when we're talking about the money that is being raised, it's also money that will be used following the surgery.
It can be used to pay for any rehabilitation that Santiago might need if a problem occurs with the surgery, and perhaps for any follow-up visits to Chicago, which might be required in the future depending on his course.
So that money is placed in a fund, and right now, obviously, there simply isn't enough money out there right now for baby Santiago to have the surgery that is tentatively scheduled on Thursday. People have been wonderful. They've gone to churches and radio stations. The Latino community has really been terrific, and I know you've had a tremendous amount of coverage by all the media, but there still isn't the amount of money out there that you need, and that's why we're doing this show today, because it's important for this child to get the surgery. And I think it certainly makes us look terrific as a sister city, the sister city with Mexico City, to be able to pull this off. We can pull cultural events. Why can't we pull this off?
I think Chicago, everybody in Chicago should be very proud of this effort from start to finish. I think perhaps we could raise the money more effectively if people appreciated the urgency of this problem for this little boy. It is not an elective operation. He really would be in big trouble if he had another hemorrhage superimposed on what the current circumstances are.
And that can happen at any time.
Anytime.
And yet you were really willing to do this and at no cost. This is really important to you, isn't it?
I don't see how we can turn our back on an 18-month-old little boy who could live an entirely normal life with one surgical procedure performed here in the United States.
It must be gratifying to do the kind of work that you do.
Well, it keeps me going.
I imagine it does. Thank you so much. It's always good to see you. And I wish you the very best with baby Santiago. We're going to come back, and we'll be back right after this message. Welcome back, and as you notice, during each break we go to a bumper where you can see the name of the fund and where you can send money to the Baby Santiago Fund. Joining me now are two very special men in my life, along with, Dr. Hafez, who was very special, but now I have two men that I've grown up with all my life, my brothers. So it's very unusual to have your brothers with you on the set. Alvin Gutierrez, with Kids International Surgical Services Fund, and Robert Gutierrez with Kids International Services Fund, Incorporated. And, basically what happened is that my brothers came to me because Dr. Daniel Hafez went to them about baby Santiago. And I have a letter here, and it's to Alvin Gutierrez, and it's from the mother of baby Santiago. And it was, when I read this letter, it was so heartbreaking. Did it break your heart?
It was very touching. I could not help but stop what we were doing and say that, we need to go to baby Santiago and take him out of harm's way.
Yeah. And then, I'd mentioned earlier about we had the stamp of approval of Maggie Daley, the First Lady of the City of Chicago, but we've also had other people that have gotten involved. Do you want to tell us?
Well, the mayor's office got involved. Lupe Calderon from the mayor's office, a press secretary from George Ryan's office, almost from every office from the county. They've all come forth to help this baby because they knew there was a need, and they had it. They couldn't turn their back.
You know what? I was just so impressed because you dragged me to church on last Sunday. I have to tell you, and it was. We went to church, we went to 2 masses, and it was on Ashland Avenue, and it was St. Pius Church on Ashland Avenue, and these masses were being held specifically for baby Santiago. And we're going to look at some of that video because it was just so emotional that day to see. And St. Pius Church at 11:30 on on Ashland Avenue. The church was packed, and I'm told that it's usually not packed, except that on Latino radio, they were announcing that baby Santiago would be there, and you can see there's baby Santiago with his mother and his grandmother. And I mean, he's just a great little kid who is just so well behaved, and people are giving them money. And I mean, I was amazed. There must have been like 1,000 people at the church that day, and they were each walking up wanting to touch the baby, wanting to give the baby money, hugging the child, wishing the child well, asking for pictures of baby Santiago, because they wanted to feel this child. And these are people that really don't have an awful lot of money. In fact, they have very little to give, and yet they were truly giving from their hearts, because they know that this child is one of their own, and they want this child to grow up, hopefully, and to lead a productive life. And they were giving whatever they could. And I was so moved that day, because usually, you know, what happens as a reporter, you're very cynical. You never think the best is going to happen. And we were all sitting there, and we were shocked. Weren't you shocked?
I thought it was a magical experience. I could not believe that this community, considering the social economic basis of it, was taking money that I thought was their food money, their weekly food money, and donating it to this baby, and almost spiritually, by magic, helping this baby resurrect from the jaws of death. It was amazing. Even KISS was born out of baby Santiago. And it's not that we can save the world, but what we can do is save one child at a time.
Yeah. And I know that this is something you're really passionate about, too, because you said, we have to do this. That's what you said to me the other day.
It just shows that it showed that people really care. You always hear of the negative things that go on in various communities, but it shows that people care, and they came out and they showed that by giving this money, by helping whatever they could help, they did. So we're very pleased. We're pleased by the turnout.
And you're excited. I mean, you want the surgery to take place, yet you know that there is a shortage of funds, and you still need funds. But because I know that everyone, the media has truly responded. I'm amazed at how the media has responded to you guys.
We live in a society as such that we have a net. We have insurances, we have other vehicles. Could you imagine, being a father myself, and CINN and Dr. Fez and Cirillo keeping our family intact, could you imagine not knowing if your child's going to live tomorrow because you don't have the funds to rescue it? It's an incomprehensible situation. Not only that, there's a propensity of Mexican Americans in this country that have this cavernous malformation. So I think KISS can be out there to rescue children that don't have a net either locally, and there's one child here locally that needs bone marrow transplants here at the Josefa de Ortiz School, and I think we're going to look at that child and see how we can come to the call.
Aren't I lucky to have two brothers like this? I mean, it's not often that you get to highlight a cause like this, and I think we're all fortunate that we're able to do this, because we were brought up with parents that said you have to give back, and that's really what you believe in, that you have to give back. And you, fortunately,
Well,
have sons.
I needed to give back because Dr. Fez operated on my son, and I don't know if he saved his life, but he definitely gave him a better life to live. Without that operation, he wouldn't have had that life. So to him, I thank him. I owe him a debt of gratitude for the rest of my life and the rest of my son's life.
So I know that you're going to continue. I mean, you've got a lot of work ahead of you, don't you?
There's a call to action. I'm not only doing this for baby Santiago and other children, but I'm doing it for myself. I can't continue to have the conscience of turning my back on someone else. And I know that this is the time that I have to take a position, as we're asking everybody out there to take a position and come to the cry of a helpless child, because without your help, this may not come to be.
Did the two of you had any idea when you first said yes to this that it was going to take on a life of its own like this? Because it truly has. I mean, you've scheduled radio shows and newspaper articles, and my gosh, it's going on and on. It's been time-consuming.
It's an endless process. It has exhausted all our energy and resources, but we didn't do it for that. Bob and I decided at one particular juncture, this is what we're going to do, because it's an obligation, it's a social consciousness, it's a humanitarian gesture.
And the Sister Cities program and the Maggie Daily, and also we have to talk about Paul Vallis.
Absolutely.
With the schools, because Paul Vallis, when he heard us talking about it, he just volunteered. We didn't even have to ask him. He said, what can I do?
Chicago public school students have a heart, not only there to learn reading, writing, but to learn compassion and estimable deeds.
And they're raising money. Isn't that what they're doing? And you received money the other day?
We have received money.
Incredible. And it's continuing, as well as the General Council of Mexico reaching out to the churches, as well as Cook County reaching out to their employees on a donation basis, as well as shows coming up this weekend, as well as radio shows with, if I may, Luis Torres, WIND, letters and letters of
people saying, we
Support.
want to give. We hope the people out there will want to do the same thing. Hey, I'm really lucky to have you two as brothers.
We even had one person who didn't have the money to donate it, but she was willing to donate her blood because she said there was such a need to be involved.
Let's hope we can pull it off. Thanks so much. We'll be back with baby Santiago right after this message. Welcome back. We've been showing you the address of the Baby Santiago Fund, and now we want to do that again so that you can have time to write it down. The address of the Baby Santiago Fund, it goes to Baby Santiago Fund, Columbus Cabrini Medical Foundation. The account number is 788-35101, 788-35101. It's located at 2520 North Lakeview, Chicago, Illinois, 60614, and that phone number is 773-388-6020. And now, it's important to introduce you to baby Santiago, who's right here on the set, and he's been so well behaved and he's so cute. And we have his mother, Pilar Olagaray, and his grandmother, Casilda Sobrado, and they speak English, which really comes in handy. But how are you feeling? What do you feel like about all the response that you've been getting here in Chicago?
Well, it's incredible. Look, so many people trying to help, and I feel very grateful for KISS Foundation and all that.
And I know that you had said that, you know, you had had no hope in Mexico. The doctors gave you no hope. And here, for the first time, Daniel Hafez is giving you hope.
Yes, yes, it's incredible. I'm very happy about that.
I can imagine. And you must really feel pretty amazed about all this. You just want him to get the operation, don't you?
That's right. This is a great city, beautiful and great people here.
And it's a city with a heart.
That's right.
And I think it's terrific that we've had, you know, our First Lady, Maggie Daley, is very concerned about baby Santiago.
That's
She's
what I
told me to
heard,
keep her
yes.
posted. All the organizations, you know, there are these posters from the American GI Forum. They're volunteering to make these huge posters up, which is wonderful. And as you can see, I'm wearing a baby Santiago
That's
button.
very nice.
So
I
hopefully,
hadn't
you know,
seen
I know that people will give, and hopefully this operation will take place at Children's Memorial Hospital on Thursday. And I know that he is in good hands because he's in the hands of Dr. Daniel Hafez from CINN. And believe me, I have a lot of faith in them. I'm so glad that you're here today, and I wish you the very best. I'm Theresa Gutierrez. See you next week. Bye-bye. Good afternoon and welcome to Sunday in Chicago. I'm Theresa Gutierrez. Today is really going to be a fun-packed show, and it's fun because we have one of the most famous opera divas right here in Chicago. She's visiting our city, and we have her here in the studio, and I have to tell you that people have been coming out of the woodwork today just to meet her and to see her and to get her autograph. So we're going to be meeting her shortly. We're also going to be talking about breast cancer because this is Breast Cancer Month. So we're going to be learning more about detection and about the right types of foods that you should be taking in order to avoid cancer. We're also going to talk about an interesting women's business conference that's going to be taking place here in Chicago at the end of the week. But first of all, you know, a few weeks ago we did a show on a child, young baby Santiago. And if you remember, he was the 18-month-old baby who came here from Mexico because he needed a surgery. He has a condition called cavernous malformation, which means that he has deep lesions inside the brain, and those lesions had to be removed. And there's only really one neurosurgeon right here in Chicago, Dr. Daniel Hafez, who would be able to do that. So we brought him to Chicago through the efforts of an organization called KISS. They raised the funds. Well, Santiago had his brain surgery on October the 16th, and he's doing well after it lasted 12 hours. Now, here you're going to see the baby on the show. And to look at him, it's hard to believe that he was living with a life-threatening illness that required a 12-hour surgery. Now, after the surgery, there was a press conference.
And I think he has recovered more than what our expectations were. I'm so happy about that. He just looked like always, but sleeping.
Very happy, and
calm. I've seen my son and he's doing good.
He was very active and wide awake, and we were no longer concerned about his ability to breathe. He was doing extremely well, I think as best as could be anticipated after the kind of surgery that he underwent. This problem, for all intents and purposes, has been cured.
KISS, Kids International Surgical Services Fund, helped to raise thousands of dollars in 4 weeks for baby Santiago's brain surgery.
Keep going, baby. Yeah, just keep right.
The media was really an integral part of bringing awareness to baby Santiago, and without it, this couldn't have not been done.
People not only sent money, they also sent a number of gifts, and one individual wrote a special poem for the baby.
Well, there were many contributors. We had contributors from Chicago Public Schools. From the children, we had contributors from St. Pius's Catholic Church who had 2 offerings on the baby. And we even had one lady who was willing to contribute her blood because she didn't have the money, but she wanted to be part of Santiago's saving his child's life.
I'd like to thank all the people that really cared. I'd like to thank Santiago for giving us this chance to be a part of this experience.
KISS's work is not over. Baby Santiago will still need money for his aftercare.
This organization now will look beyond baby Santiago to other children in need.
You can still send money to KISS's Baby Santiago Fund, and that's at Columbus Cabrini Medical Foundation. The account number is 788-35101, and their phone number is 773-388-6020. That's 773-388-6020. And what I'd like to say is that when we did the show, I really have to thank our viewers, because there was one viewer who offered her home for the family, but there was another viewer, a gentleman who wishes to remain anonymous, and because he just was so moved by seeing baby Santiago on the show, he gave several $1,000. And it really helps, because I have to tell you that to be in the hospital, it costs $5,000 a day, and the aftercare is going to cost money. But the baby is really fine. I've spent a lot of time seeing him, and it's just amazing how the family is just, their whole life has been turned around, and now there is hope for this family. So I want to thank all of our viewers. We'll be back right after this message.